itself beyond borders. To unpack this, we are joined by three distinguished voices. To my immediate left, I do have Yusuf Serunkoma, political analyst. Good morning to you.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you. A respected researcher and commentator on governance, civil society, and state power. He's bringing on these stable, critical lenses on how political systems do evolve under pressure. Next to him, we do have MP-elect Bulambuli constituency, Emmanuel Wepohukul. How are you, and how is the journey to the speakership?
Yeah, good morning, viewers. Good morning, Priscilla. I'm happy to be here once again, and the journey to deputy speakership is taking a serious twist, and it's going to be the shock of the year 2026.
Okay.
And yesterday I met Right Honorable Tayebu at the entrance of Parliament. He was saying, "My brother, why are you finishing me?" I said, "Wait, I'm coming." Yeah, thank you very much, and I wish you a good discussion.
And I believe you did state that George Musisi is your brother also there.
Yes, and I'm going to request him to vote for me as his next deputy speaker of parliament.
MP-elect Chair Municipality, George Musisi, we are happy to have you on this table. Good morning.
Good morning, Priscilla. Good morning, viewers. Always a pleasure to be here.
Okay. Representing urban constituency at the heart of opposition politics, but of course offering insight into the grassroots realities and the strategies that are being deployed by the National Unity Platform. Now, framing our discourse this morning, we get to look at where we stand right now. We all know the matter on boards, reflecting on the temporary departure of Bobi Wine from the country. From an analytical point of view, I'll start with you, Serunkoma. Does this signal a weakening in the democracy of our country today?
No. First of all, you're framing the question very problematically. We're not a democracy. You know, if you say there's a weakening of our democracy, it means we already have a democracy. We are not a democracy, and we are not trying to build one. So that's the bottom line. We're surviving under a thing which pretends as a democracy, but in all intents and purposes, an autocracy. Right? So what Bobi Wine has done is to do what normal people would do, especially if you're the leading opposition candidate. You received authentic intelligence that you're about to be arrested. You were on the run for quite some time. Normal people would wish to run for their lives. And that doesn't dent his credentials as the opposition leader. Across history, revolutionaries have often decided to disappear if you are threatened by capture, right? I don't know of any revolutionary in history who stood and waited for their captors. They're not there. So what he's done is what you do under an autocracy that you're trying to challenge. Of course, it dents, you know, the fan base. It dents the foot soldiers left behind. It demoralizes them. But it's not a dent on democracy, because we pretend, we masquerade as one. Right? The masquerade is very exciting. We masquerade as one, but we're not. I think the premise of the question is quite problematic.
Okay.
Yeah.
Could you elaborate more on we are not a democracy?
So, I mean, there's something I've often spoken about, which we call a modern autocracy. Modern autocracies are very sophisticated. They sort of reproduce themselves through what appears like democracy. So they have a big and noisy parliament, but it's essentially useless. They have what looks like a judicial process, right? You can often get civil cases. You know, wonderfully, recently we've had, I think you're leading the story of the overturning of the Computer Misuse Act, which I think is wonderful. So you get cases like that ruled in favor of the people, right? But on hardcore political cases, on cases that really matter in the lives of people, the powers that be will get the judgment they deserve. So you have what looks like a free press, right? That with limitation, that up to a particular point, you can't do much. You know, Daily Monitor is under so much threat. It's been, you know, earmarked for closure for being allegedly the opposition newspaper, right? So you have the things that pretend to be a democracy. You often organize elections, but you know, the outcome could be predetermined 5 years earlier. Right? So that's the nature of a modern autocracy. So they took lessons from the autocrats that came before them, and they knew you don't have to sort of abolish the constitution dismiss parliament. You don't have to gag the press. But you need to have a pretension of the existence of those things. What the Idi Amins and Bokassas and the Mobutu Seko could get by absolute force, you can get it through the constitution. So you pretend, you have the facade of democracy, but it doesn't look like a democracy. And I think our lens is, as journalists and as researchers, and I think also players on the other side, we have failed to fully appreciate how a modern autocracy operates. But I think we're clearly in one.
Okay,
yeah.
All right. George, as we look to the different conflicting narratives, some are of the argument that the state is actively pursuing opposition actors. Others are questioning how such a high-profile figure could leave the country undetected after so much search here and there. What does this situation reveal about Uganda's security apparatus and the public trust in it?
Of course, the Ugandan security apparatus is coached towards political opposition. Their understanding of security, stroke insecurity, is towards what they seem as political opposition. Especially, this becomes even more pertinent during heated exchanges like we had in the last elections. If you noticed that our presidential candidate, the NUP presidential candidate, at any one time, especially when he was in Kampala Metropolitan, had at least 30 security vehicles following him. And you would always wonder, is this the best use of our security? So when it comes to public trust, of course, there's one thing that the law says about how security is supposed to behave, how security is supposed to be non-partisan. But we've seen over time that that non-partisanship only comes into play when you are, or the stick is only called out to any security officer when you are seen to favor the opposition. We've seen security officers campaigning openly for the ruling party. And of course, that has been growing over time. At one time, General Tumukonde, who is now a member of parliament elect, was court-martialed for what seemed like comments he made when he was a member of parliament on a radio station. And he spent over 9 years battling a court case. We've since come full circle to the extent that we've seen even soldiers, even the selection, people in uniform, openly campaigning. We have the Chief of Defense Forces, chairperson of the political outfit. So the security, that has seemed, the involvement of security, seeing themselves as an armed wing of the ruling party, has certainly dented their public credentials. I don't think there's any reasonable Ugandan who still looks at them as partisan, that even when they issue all these security alerts. So when it comes to policing opposition, especially the NUP in the recent past, no one can honestly believe that they're doing a professional job. We've had a number of our people abducted, and we use that word deliberately because an arrest is the procedure steps to carry out an arrest are well laid in the Constitution. What happens where people take you and you don't know them, you don't know where they're taken, they keep you for unknown hours by people in security. And we've seen senior security officers even swearing affidavits in court saying we don't have this person. And then 2 days later, they produce the person in court. It has the most recently happened to our deputy presidents. Some of them were even taken on camera, like Jody Tukamshava, and they saw affidavits saying we don't have them. Then they produce them. So certainly the public trust is at an all-time low. Everyone views them as part of the ruling party. However, for an opposition person like our NUP party president to slip away from them, it wouldn't be the first time. Of course, many people tend to think that because of the overly politicization of the armed forces and the NUPization, if I could use that word, of the armed forces, that if you're only policing NUP, it has certainly created another public looking at them as anti-NUP forces. That even if you go to police and report a case of a missing person and you say that this person was taken by people in civilian wear in a drone, they will not even follow it up. But for political figures, Dr. Kizza Besigye did it. He didn't go through the airport. It's not the first time that they have always found a way of slipping through the net. using all other, because every time you are seen as an, you always find forces that also are willing to help. So Dr. Kizza Besigye did it. Even the Kabaka of Uganda, Ssekabaka Mutesa, when he felt his life was under threat, he slipped through. So it has always happened. It's always an anti-force to the seeming politicization of the forces, that they no longer see them as a professional, either army or police, but one which is out on a witch hunt.
Emmanuel, how would you interpret this sign of democratic strain in Uganda currently?
I want Priscilla and all viewers outside there, I want to assure my colleagues that Uganda is under a democratic government, where you have said, my brother Musisi has pointed severally that in the previously conducted election. So in a non-democratic country, you can't go into an election the way we did. And that's why my brother has been elected as an MP elect for Kira municipality. And I'm very proud of my brother, the Honorable Semujunganda, who outrightly came out and admitted that I have been defeated democratically. And then he's ready to hand over to him. Therefore, I don't want to hear even my brother Sirinkuma has said so many things here. And yet he has even the freedom of speech to come here and then air what he's airing out right now. In governments, like he was giving reference to former President Idi Amin, I think he wouldn't be mentioning what he's mentioning if he was under monarchy or any kind of government that is trying to say. Therefore, I am also here as an MP elect from Rabli because I went through a democratic process. And I one time contested in 2021, as I told you some time back, and then I lost. And it was a free and fair election. Therefore, I want to encourage my brothers that Uganda, for example, His Excellency Yoweri Kaguta Museveni started looking for votes some time back. He tried to create an attachment with the grassroots, with the local electorate, through PDM and then other process. I think you saw how it was moving across the country, while others were dramatizing the whole process, singing songs and doing what. Songs can't be turned into votes sometimes. You have to do, voters are looking for real solutions. You must provide solutions to the, for example, infrastructure. For example, I'm telling you how we have been, the government has been assisting the youth and then other local people at parish level by giving them some capital to start their businesses and then do different things. Therefore, I want to confirm and say nobody is chasing Honorable Kyagulanyi.
So how would you translate or interpret the heavy security deployment that has been at his house since elections?
Because of the plans that you saw how when they were in, I think in Kapeka, when Honorable, one of the honorables was saying that if the vote fails, we are going to find an alternative. Even Honorable Kyagulanyi has severally mentioned that we are going to have Plan B. Akalulu, Wekagana, we are going to set up maybe demonstrations. I thought you saw the president mentioning about Gen Zs that had been hired from Kenya to come and then mobilize and they do riots here. So it is for the safety of Ugandans, including you, Priscilla, and me, and our property.
Is that to say that demonstration can't happen simply because a political leader has been detained?
Come again?
Is that to say demonstrations can't happen simply because a political figure?
Yeah, if they can happen lawfully, there is no problem. But severally, I think the Uganda security, especially the IGP, has always asked that in case you want to do a demonstration, an official demonstration, please write. I don't know when they have written that we are going to demonstrate lawfully and they have been prohibited from doing that.
So since January 15th to the 18th of March, today as we have this conversation, we have not seen any unlawful demonstration, nor any demonstration to begin with. And so from a governing point of view,
and the question would
continue to be the reasons as to why this particular political leader is being witch-hunted.
The question would be demonstrating over what? For example, the NUP has only one MP outside Uganda, and is coming from Bugis sub-region where I hail from. That is the Honorable. That is Honorable Baptist Nambeshe from Ubududa. Therefore, I am wondering if you have mobilized your votes in Western Uganda, in Northern Uganda, and Eastern Uganda, you should come on the table and then wait for the results. But if you have only MPs, for example, around Buganda, or you have mandate only in one sub-region, you have a quota out of the 4 sub-regions we have.
We are not disputing things that are regarding the elections. What we're disputing is the aftermath of the elections.
Yes.
What you are referring to are things that happened during the election. That's not our conversation this morning. Our conversation is democracy in exile. That being said, Yusuf, the temporary relocation of Bobi Wine, I'll come back to you. Is it a security necessity or a political strategy right now? Because when politics actually leaves the country, it does not disappear, it transforms.
Well, it's both. It's both. There was a threat to his life, right? He was threatened by arrest. So the UPDF rummaged his house, beat up his wife, and looking for him. So there's an actual personal threat to his life. So I think getting out of the country is, on one level, a personal security strategy, but also it's a political strategy that, in moments of intense political activity, when a leader decides to leave one location to another, it's being strategic. And so you can, it's weaker, but you have to be able to stay away from your captors, but be able to mobilize the forces you've left behind. So the challenge that Bobi Wine faces is whether these Muslims that he has left behind will be obedient to whatever I'll be telling them to do. Whether they'll be able to carry on the mandate. I don't know how it's spelled out for them, but they'll be able to carry on the mandate of their political party. Right? So that's the challenge. But at both levels, strategically it's accurate, and also at a personal level it's accurate. What do you do? You have to remain outside of jail so as to continue to fight another day. And I did develop this point really sufficiently. Nelson Mandela had to exit South Africa at some point. The Islamic Revolution in Iran, when it was victorious in 1979, the leader was outside of the country. Every revolutionary, in our history, at that critical moment, they have to exit one geographical space so that they're able to live to fight another day. Of course, you could be politically useful when you're in jail, but I think your value is more, achievable if you are able to speak to your forces. So that's the challenge that we're going to have. But my worry, if someone wants to point to the challenges of it's weaker. It's a weaker position. Of course, when you don't have your leader on the ground, you're weakened, you're demobilized. I'm sure what the man who wants to become Deputy Speaker of Parliament was trying to do is that there was supposed to be protests after the election. These are by the Constitution protected. If they are to protest, it's within the law. And you don't have to ask for permission to do that. It's Constitution protected. So when Bobi Wine was on the run, and now he's in exile, so the forces that were supposed to mobilize for what is within the Constitution were unable to do that because they didn't have leadership, right? So it dents the political party, it dents the revolution, but at the level of strategy, I think it's accurate.
Okay, all right. George, you did make a reference to history. History doesn't repeat itself, it only often does the rhyming over and over again, given the opportunity to come out. Are we witnessing a chapter where opposition politics is a symbol of unresolved structural issues?
Yes, of course, to an extent, yes. I want to take it up from where Yusuf started, where he described this as a modern autocracy. And my brother tends to think that the presence of elections is in itself a sign of democracy. Actually, very many military governments indeed organize elections. What happens is that every time we've had these recurrent issues in our democratic space, or our pseudo-democratic space, if you look at almost all post-independent leaders of Uganda, apart from Idi Amin, all of them have have had to run out of the country at some point, including General Museveni. They have had to run out of the country. So that means that there are recurrent issues where there is a strong man who creates an environment which doesn't create space for any form of civil competition. And the last 40 years of this government, 30 of which we've had a constitution, it's put in place some minimums. And some of those minimums are that what we call rights, and Honorable here is saying, you know, they are at his home because he was going to do this. And I don't know that you had other private conversations with him, because I've not had him say the things you said here of Plan B, and I've not had him yet. I think I want to imagine I've spent more time with him. He has said it openly, possibly in your private spaces. But the bigger issue is that if you think that anyone has committed a crime, our minimums in this thing we call the Constitution, which we call the consensus, the national consensus, are clear. But what is increasingly happening is that there is a supreme power which is beyond this thing document we call the Constitution. That is why you hear all these sentiments like, I only release Dr. Besigye when my father tells me. We've had other soldiers saying, you know, a civilian can't, we can't salute a civilian. We've had all these sentiments every time we're going into. So that means that there's a general realization that it's not this document we call the Constitution, but it's a power elsewhere, which either runs in the military or the family or others, and that has been recurrent, and that has always been our actually still as a country, and that sadly is the point where we're heading. Okay,
just to follow up, what should Ugandans read the in-between of this situation that they could be overlooking?
Of course, the in-between is if you have all the civil political forces, opposition forces, all of them unable to do the civil politics. If you look at the position, the opposition parties, and of course opposition parties are recognized. It's not criminal being in opposition. I mean, I'm talking about the civil opposition forces. If you criminalize civil opposition, as we speak now, civil society was almost non-existent. All the civil rights NGOs have had their licenses suspended. They have had their accounts frozen. I think the only one operating in that space is Uganda Law Society, and we know that it's almost limping because of the government machinations. You have almost the professional bodies, you have the academia, you have the media almost censored. What is happening? What is happening to that's what organizations should be looking at, that what space is left, because they tend to think that all the change should come from the opposition. Actually, opposition in democracy works best when it has supporting forces like decent civil society. You look, but we have all those otherwise independent voices almost crippled. Then what other Uganda should be asking, what next? What other space is being left?
Okay, we move to exile and ground politics. Emmanuel, this is why I want to bring you in and help us to understand what risks are emerging if the opposition actually does begin to feel disconnected from democracy.
I don't know why they feel so, and at the end of the day they go through an election like we did. You were barring me from talking about before elections, but those are where we pick the lessons from. That Honorable Kyagulanyi was in the 2021 election, and when he lost it, he went to to Supreme Court and then filed a case which he later on withdrew, and maybe why they voted.
The very same election you're referring to, where he was taken by security forces at termination.
When they elected, when they gave my brother here, Musisi, a known lawyer, the flag for NUP in Chira, I thought they are bringing in more lawyers, so that in case there are irregularities, they think there are irregularities in the election, they are going to follow the democratic process, for example, of filing another suit to Supreme Court or following the Presidential Elections Act, and then maybe the Article 104 of the Ugandan Constitution to find out where maybe whatever would have happened in form of irregularities. But I want to encourage or just spot on tell you that in Uganda, I think we have the highest number of opposition parties. If you went to maybe democratic countries like mature democracies like USA, like UK, they have fewer opposition parties, maybe 1, 2. But in Uganda, I think we have up to 10 or even 12 opposition parties. We have officially allowed them to register, and they are competing. And instead of doing grassroots mobilization, they spend a lot of time doing political bickering, and then they end up getting few votes. After getting few votes, they think they have been rigged. And I want to ask people who are questioning security. We have one of the best securities in East and Central Africa, if not across the continent.
Emmanuel,
we wouldn't.
Let me follow up. What is the role of political parties in our democracy?
Thank you very much. But before I answer that,
first answer that one.
Priscilla, let me answer.
No, let's first answer that one. What is the role of political parties?
I know I'm going to bring to you the role of political parties, but when you say that Honorable Kyagulanyi escaped from security circles and then he went to exile, it is not true. And by the way, nobody is looking for Honorable Kyagulanyi. He should come back home freely. Why he's if he goes through Kenya, because we're in the East African dispensation where you just show your ID at Busia or any other porous border and you cross to another country, you go. If we can extract somebody, Dr. Kizza Besigye from Kenya, then how about someone from within who is claiming he escaped?
So on that note, what is the role of political parties in the democracy you say we have?
Yes, the role of political parties is to offer different ideologies, to bring different manifestos for the citizens, electorates to look through, to scan through and say, where do we want to take our country in the next 5 years or in the next 10 years. And then they look at DP, they look at NUP, they look at NRM, they look at other conservative party, and then they choose the best. Therefore, it is to promote democracy by giving different ideas on the national level, and then the electorates will choose the best person.
Thereby, what risks are emerging if opposition parties or other political parties begin to feel disconnected from what you have just said?
I don't agree with the assertion that they are feeling disconnected. Yet we are amassing, we are getting more parties coming from opposition to the NRM. For example, you saw the agreement we have with DP. You have seen several opposition party, members from the FDC. Of recent, you saw Honorable Yusuf Sibambi crossing from opposition coming to the NRM. So at the end of the day, people are seeing right.
Thank you so much, Emmanuel. George, what risks do you face opposition in Uganda if they feel disconnected from democracy?
Of course, the biggest risk apart for the usual risks from the state, the threats from the state, but the biggest risk for everyone is the feeling that the general feeling that this cannot work anymore. Then what are you pushing people to do? For instance, my brother talked about elections, and what we just went through in many places, it was akin to military operation. in many places it was akin to daylight fraud. So if you push people out of civil democratic spaces, if you make there's that famous quotation that those who make peaceful transition inevitable, they make the first one inevitable. That if you push the otherwise civil democratic forces from any form of fair competition with you, where are you pushing them to? If you look at elections that are supposed to be, that our constitution guarantees that are supposed to take place every 5 years, we've always had issues with elections. We've had the involvement of security, we have those recurrent issues. However, increasingly, from 2021 up to now, we have seen a deeper militarization of the process, that it's almost, in some places, in some constituencies, like in Zimbabwe, we saw even an armed officer guarding someone about staffing. So these are the bigger risk for all of us, even those who are political, even those who are in NRM, like my brother, is that if you make people competing with you a hard thing or an inevitable thing, where are you pushing them to?
All right, we're going to take a short breather. We return with pressing discussions regarding the state of democracy, exile and opposition without borders. Do stay with us. It's 8:30 o'clock. We do continue on with conversations here on Morning at NTV. Let's also talk about something that many of you actually tend to put off. That is health insurance. A lot of Ugandans do not have it because they feel it is expensive. And the truth is, peace of mind when it comes to your health is priceless. That's why DFCU Bank, in partnership with Jubilee Insurance, has introduced the DFCU Blue Care. This is a comprehensive medical insurance plan that is designed for an ordinary Ugandan in mind. It is covering both inpatient and outpatient care. It is covering maternity care. It covers critical illnesses, telemedicine access, and even funeral benefits. And all this for just 981,000 Ugandan shillings per year, with a cover of up to 120 million Ugandan shillings. So to sign up, simply call the toll-free number, which is 0800 222 000 to get that cover. DFCU Bank, regulated by the Insurance Regulatory Authority of Uganda. Terms and conditions do apply. DFCU, going further together. That being said, back to our Kickstarter, Democracy in Exile, Opposition Without Borders, Survivor-Driven Measures in a Democracy. And we've been having these conversations with Yusuf Serunkuma, political analyst. We've been having the conversation with the MP-elect Budambuli constituency, Mr. Emmanuel, and then also Mr. George, MP-elect Kira municipality, all on this table. Now, let me turn to you, Yusuf. We look to exiles often losing the horizontal voice, which is something that you were of the argument directly here before we came back on air. So direct connection with citizens is a bit difficult at the time right now for Robert Chagulanyi, but there's the vertical voice influence that we are looking to, foreign influence, foreign media, and foreign mobilization, if we can put it that way. For the case of Bobi Wine, is this to any advantage for him as an individual, and then secondary to the party?
Like seeking external help? Is that the question? Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's something I was itching to comment about from what Emmanuel was trying to do with George, trying to, to encourage him. You won an election, it was democratic, so why do you complain? So modern autocracies are competitive. It's competitive authoritarianism. It's an invitation to the elite to come and eat with you. Because, a modern autocracy thrives on absolute corruption. It thrives on absolute corruption and violence. So Parliament, as Parliament is set up, it becomes a bribe. You see some of the astute elite, the sort of the public intellectuals, the public icons. You see a very well-credentialed lawyer such as George Musisi. He has potential to mobilize the public. So you send him an invite to compete and come to Parliament. And then you overwhelm him with perks. You see, you overwhelm him, so you give him a soft life, which means you buy his complacency. So it's competitive in that way, because it's a bribe, it's a bribing sort of tradition, that what you do, you're not very coercive towards your opponents. You're constantly inviting them to come and join you at the eating table. But by and large, they do nothing. Like basically, whatever you want to go through parliament, because it's your parliament, it's just numbers, not persuasion of arguments. But what you do quite sufficiently is you make sure whoever is in that house is enjoying a comfortable soft life. Musi doesn't like this when I tell him that they already brought him into a soft life. You know, look at man, the man is very smartly dressed. Banks on his doorsteps giving him, sending him money as far as he enters parliament. Even this man also here, they're going to give him like a 300 million vehicle. The salaries are going to be humongous. It's bribing them. But it doesn't look like that because it's within the law. It's technical. He went through an election and actually won it. You know what I mean? But that's the nature of an authoritarian, which tends to corrupt the entire public. Among other things, it invites the elite of society, the most credentialed. I'm telling you, I also get invited to join parliament. Many of my friends in this sort of public commentary are often invited to join parliament because the entire idea is to buy us into comfortable life in silence. So that's we need to appreciate that. So if you're jabbing, saying, oh, you know, you should be happy because you're in election, you actually invited him into corruption. Parliament is the bribe itself. At the point you asked me, I hope I still have a bit of time, on what it means for Bobi Wine to go out of the country and sort of seek external help. It's difficult, you know, as an activist, as a leader of a revolution, you find yourself in that dilemma that you have to have external help. Museveni had to find external help. As a country throughout our history, we've been unable to sort of overthrow bad governments without external help. Okay, the Tanzanians had to come here. MI16 and Libya had to give weapons to Yoweri Museveni. That's been our history. There was a man who was in Singapore and the British diplomat told him, you're not returning to your country because they already manufactured a coup back home, right? So that's our history. And the activist finds himself in that position that for you to actually have meaningful change, you have to involve the international community. And the other dilemma is that these international people control most of our wealth here. They control most of our lives here, right? The things that matter in our lives as ordinary Ugandans, foreigners are in charge, from our banks to our coffee to our other resources to everything, they're in charge. So you find yourself that because of their vested interest in this country, you have to speak to them. Now, the dilemma that Bobi Wine finds himself into is a noble move to seek assistance from outside. But the problem is that they are very selfish. These foreigners are very selfish because they're always looking out to their interests first. And what Museveni has done quite sufficiently, what Museveni has done quite sufficiently is to understand that the only people who are able to overthrow me are foreigners. So what Museveni has done is to give them whatever they want. So the dilemma a new activist face is if you go to those people, they have almost the entire country via Museveni. In fact, Museveni is always asking, what more can I give you? You want me? In fact, if they called on him to send soldiers to Ukraine, Museveni will gladly send soldiers to Ukraine. Because we're in Central African Republic, we're in South Sudan, we're in Sudan, we're in Somalia. Remember, his son was threatening the American ambassador that because you're helping Bobi Wine, I might pull my soldiers out of Somalia. You know, so the pretense that we're Pan-African, but it's actually because the Americans want UPDF in Somalia, right? That's the tweet from the Sun. So that's the dilemma that Bobi Wine finds himself, that if it means befriending foreigners, Museveni is their bosom buddy. He has given them everything they need. Museveni bankrupted the ordinary Ugandan and handed the economy to foreigners. So, you know, there's one of these pretensions. We have close to 2 million refugees in this country, and we have open border policy. The argument is that we are very Pan-African. No, we are not. It's because Mzungu don't want Africans to go to their countries, and Museveni has made it easier to accommodate them here. Okay. In fact, to the point that we're even buying them in exchange for things. So if Mzungu, you don't want your people, you can bring them.
I'll be back to you, Yusuf. Let me go to George. Currently, new leadership for the National Unity Platform is with Dr. Lina Zedriga stepping into the leadership role. One of my first questions is, what are the immediate pressures that the new leadership has to deal with in the absence of its political principle?
Priscilla, let me just 30 seconds respond to Yusuf's famous argument about Parliament being the bribe. I get where he's coming from, although I think that's also a very narrow way of looking at it, to the extent that, yes, Indeed, even if some people can fall for the PACs, even when they're not in parliament. In any case, if you look at the opposition MPs, they have always been the minority. They have always been very few. Opposition is a bigger movement. And for me, I don't want to look at opposition as us, the leaders, or the institution, the party I come from. Opposition is the cause that people attribute or people stand for. So if you talk about 50 elites going to parliament and you're saying that, okay, now they are compromised, I don't think that compromises the opposition. Indeed, history is filled with so many people. For instance, the Raila Odinga has been one of the big opposition leaders in Kenya. And he was in parliament for a very long time. Until very recently, when he shook hands and whatever. We had Morgan Tsvangirai in Zimbabwe. He opposed Mugabe, a pseudo-democracy like ours, and he was in parliament at some point. So it's possible for people to fall for PACs even when they're not in parliament. In any case, people who go to parliament are not even 1% of what you call for the opposition. In any case, there are three ways of how you're going to engage as a party. Are you going to go for the formal ways of for instance, that are recognized by the Constitution, go for elections and try to mobilize? Or are you going to go for the informal ones of not going for the election? So you have to choose as a party. If you take one route, then you try to use it to the maximum. Regarding the new leadership, of course, we've just come out of a bruising election, where in many areas our victory was robbed. Of course, Emmanuel is going to tell me go to court, as if that in itself is a magic bullet. The biggest task for the leadership is to galvanize the forces, pick up those who are every time we go out of an election. Of course, it's, I told you earlier that the security forces look at the opposition, right now NUP, previously FDC, as an enemy. Yeah, you have all our deputy presidents, I think apart from one, facing charges. One is still in custody, facing terrorism charges, despite that he was a victim. We have a number of our people on the run, others are in custody. We still have, so the biggest task is galvanize the forces and push on the cause that the NUP stands for.
What are the internal structures that must be activated in order to ensure that there's maintenance of cohesion?
The internal party structures? Of course, when you look at the party structures, all of them are intact. Like I've said, that all the leaders are present, some are facing charges, some in custody, but all the structures are intact. The biggest strength of the NUP are the people rallying behind it. It's because, and those people are rallying behind NUP because of what they think NUP stands for, or what they know NUP stands for. The strength of NUP is not at Kavule, is not in the name, is not in the dress code. You know that they have always banned, you put up red, they ban the red attire. You put up, so it's not in the dress code. It's because of, and I always insist that our DNA is that thing they call people power. That the people who are rallying behind it are rallying behind us because of the cause that they think we stand for. So these structures are okay, the structures are available, but, and for as long as you still resonate with what the people think you are resonating for, those structures will always be supported.
Okay. Some people have also been of the view that the interim leadership risks fragmentation for the National Unity Platform. Are there any opportunities to actually have institutional strengthening so that that doesn't become a reality anyway?
I think that the threats of fragmentation are just overly exaggerated. And for obvious reasons, by the obvious people. Every time there's a serious opposition group, like the NUP, they, especially working in our fragile democracies or modern autocracies or military states or democracy, the same threats will exist. There will always be people. For instance, the NRM government is always dangling goodies for people to cross over. They are always either dangling goodies or actual physical threats of either facing legal persecution or even physical harm. So those threats will always be there, and they have always been there, and they always be faced, all the threat stroke risks. However, in terms of the internal cohesion, speaking as a person who has his ears and eyes so close to all corners, I can say that it's not, there is no internal implosion at all.
Okay.
Can I just say something to that?
Before you come in, Emmanuel, on that note, given the realities that the biggest opposition party in the recently concluded elections is facing today currently, what would be your advice as they try to navigate the present day situation where they're losing the horizontal voice but building a vertical voice?
Thank you very much. Let me borrow a forest language, if you would understand it, but maybe the viewers will understand it. NUP is like a savanna species called the combretum, and is competing with NRM, which is a tropical tree species like Tandrophragma utelia, the highest mahogany, the tallest mahogany in the forest. And they are in the savannas even diminishing. If you look at the number of NUP MPs that were that they got in the last election, I think there were about 54 MPs. Now they have shrunk to about 40 something. The last time I think there were 47 MPs. That means what Musisi is saying, they are not consolidating even what they have. They have already started losing what they had. Even in Uganda, by the way, in the 2021 elections, they had, I think, even at local councils, they had so many NUPs. But this time, the voters said, no, we are not just going to vote the colored, we are not going to vote the umbrella. What are they bringing on board? Which solutions are they going to bring to our local problems? Therefore, I want to advise, for example, the NUP, if you are to consolidate, stop running around foreign capitals seeking sympathy. I think Serukuma raised a very pertinent issue here, that even if you run to those foreign countries, they are going to first look at your interests. I mean their interests first. How are they going to benefit from your incoming government? What are their priorities before even they usher in a hand to support you in any way? And they have seen, as Honorable Bobi Wine is running to them, for them they are coming. I think you saw in the new vision of today that yesterday the American army sent by, I mean through Lieutenant General Flynn was here yesterday, busy discussing collaborations, busy discussing on how we can do regional development, and then they support our country as we also support some of their interests in our country in terms of the resources we have. Therefore, I want to advise, as you have asked me, the NUP, please concentrate in grassroots mobilization, but also the challenge they have in allocation of their positions. As President Museveni was busy appointing Her Excellency Major Jessica Alupo from Teso sub-region as the Vice President of this country, after Right Honorable His Excellency Edward II, who had just come from Uganda. For them, they were moving from a leader of opposition who is from Uganda, and another one that was the Honorable Mpuga, now another one who is... So they should go beyond a cocoon of a tribal party to spreading across the country, because Uganda is not only for a certain you can't mobilize on tribal basis, but you have to show national ideas, visionary leadership that you can end up getting many votes.
As we come to the final bit of this conversation, Yusuf, civic space does not collapse overnight. It erodes. Yeah. Where we stand right now, in your view, where did the breakdown between state authority and what we should be knowing as the civic freedom begin?
I mean, there's a question you ask about Lina becoming president of the NUP. I mean, is she president or caretaker?
Acting president.
Acting president. And I wanted to say that, you know, NUP faces the same dilemma. It has to face the same threat as the parties that came before it. The sitting government has a familiar script of how to disintegrate political parties. It has a well-tested and tried script. If you look at UPC, what used to be UPC is almost non-existent. If you look at DP, you don't know whether it's now fully NRM or it's still an opposition-leaning political party. If you look at FDC, it's been disintegrating day by day.
Yeah.
I'm sure by the next next 5 years, we're into this circus of elections, there might not be FDC completely.
There will be an NRM.
So that's the threat that NUP faces. That Museveni has mastered how to disintegrate political parties. You throw money at them. You bribe elite. You threaten. Kasavu Kanyama. If you can't get Musi to join, you throw him in jail. Right? It's Kasavu Kanyama. So this is a very familiar script. You find something that you can tie on him to throw him in jail. And they have started right after the election. Munga Chivumbi is in jail. They just released two of the other sort of regional leaders. So if you look at the life of NUP moving forward, the threat is already established. So what we wait to see how they are willing to use their hammer, because they know how to, dismantle political parties. Museveni has proudly said he will finish them off, right? When you talk about civic space, in my assessment, there has never been civic space anywhere. I think the activists have to create the space. We tend to have this sort of cliche that shrinking civic space. There's never a civic space, especially if you're in an autocracy. There's no space. You have to create it. An autocrat is not going to roll you a red carpet and say, you come and start opposing me. You start mobilizing. My friends, Agatha Tahiry, an activist, the journalist Solomon Serwanja had their accounts frozen. These are like, Serwanja is sort of an activist journalist, and Agatha is a through and through activist. But the threat is already being thrown at them. There's never space. Malema Easy, for his activism against the judiciary, he's in jail. Isaac Semakadef just banging the tables, he's in exile. So there's never space. The activist has to craft their space. There's so much space. It depends on how you look at it. If you want the autocrat to roll you a red carpet, he's not going to do that. But if you have to carve out your space. So, that's the dilemma of every activist, is finding ways of carving out space for us.
All right. So, as we close this conversation, democracy in exile, opposition without borders, what are your closing shots and thoughts on that? I'll start with you, George.
Well, I think all of us need to come to realization, and by all of us, I mean even colleagues in NRM, that we all win when we play by the rules. It's one thing to look at the NUP as an enemy. My brother came here in a politicking mode. NUP has failed to go beyond this. I think it's a script. However, we're talking about issues of what the locals and what is being done. And at those basic minimums, what I call basic minimums that are set under our laws, should have no political lenses. The moment you upload unfairness or an injustice because it's happening, because at the end of the day, what is happening to NUP are things that are outside the law. And 30 years after our constitution, we should not be having people running out of Uganda because of threats to their lives. We should not be having people missing. We have missing persons. Some have been missing for 6 years. Missing Ugandans. We should not be having that. We should not be having people in jail because of political affiliations. So it's one thing to chase stamp, as call yourself a mahogany tree, but history will be here for all of us to know that there have been, there's a gentleman who has ever described himself as mahogany. We all know where he is. All right. Thank you very much. Emmanuel?
I think I would advise all political parties in Uganda, instead of concentrating on seeking for foreign aid, running here and there, being dramatic in a way that you want to seek sympathy, and then they cause riots. Those riots affect all of us. Priscilla, you have seen what is happening in Iran right now, what happened in Libya, what happened elsewhere in the world, and what is happening in South Sudan. So I don't want to see Uganda reach those extremes. There is room for dialogue, there is room for policy alternatives, and then we can sit down as Ugandans and then seek a way forward. But the most important, let us concentrate on mobilizing the locals, the electorates. They will give us direction. Thank you very much.
Yusuf.
Ismail wants to become Deputy Speaker.
Yes.
Now, let me tell you.
No, don't tell the Deputy Speaker. Your closing remarks.
You call me Right Honorable Deputy Speaker.
You know, the Deputy Speaker, the potential Deputy Speaker of this country, said the Uganda should look at South Sudan, look at Sudan. And you know the reason why those countries are in the state they were in, especially Sudan right now? Because the man who was in charge of that country held that country for over 30 years. He held elections. The last election he held before he was chased, he won by 86%.
It's not about the duration of time. It's about the ideology and vision somebody
possesses. We close morning at NTV. This conversation is going to close. Yusuf, do you have closing remarks?
The closing remarks were to warn ourselves. We're staring at Sudan in the face and we're burying our heads in the sand. We're looking at Libya because we have pretended to constantly organize elections when we know the outcome. And that's dangerous. There's so much pent-up anger. There's so much anger in the unemployed, in those who can't find Medicaid, in those who are being ferried to Middle East in slave conditions. There's so much anger. And once this house starts to burn down, we will all burn.
All right. As we close, one thing is clear: democracy is not only tested at the ballot paper, but in the space between power and participation. The idea of democracy in exile forces us to actually confront an even more difficult question as we conclude this conversation. Can a political movement actually remain rooted at home while its leadership is operating abroad? Beyond that, ultimately, we get to look at the strength of any democracy not lying just in institutions, but in the confidence of its people to engage and also to question, but also to belong. So Uganda now finding itself at the intersection of leadership in country and out of country, between pressure and possibility. That is definitely a pressure point for us as a country that we must address. That being said, as we come to the end of today's conversation, we're also reminding you that DFCU is here and is here to guide you, especially when it comes to life care insurance. And so